It is the sunshiniest day to just show up. Hi, everyone. Yvonne Heath here, nurse turned author, speaker, changemaker, and your host. Welcome to Navigating Grief with Heart and Humor, where we talk about, plan, and prepare for grief, transitions, end of life, all the messiness in between, long before it arrives, so we can diffuse the fear and live fully now. Most of the time, we've been in the deep trenches of grief. We haven't had these conversations before. And the truth of the matter is that grief is a part of this journey, sometimes the price of living and loving, but it is worth it, and our hearts will heal if we learn how to take better care of ourselves and each other, if we become more proactive and normalize these conversations. When? Before, during, and always. Before grief arrives, when we are in crisis, when our hearts feel broken, and always. Where should these conversations take place? Anywhere and everywhere. And that is what I aspire to normalize. There are many beautiful souls in the world being a voice for change, and all we can do is light one candle, be one voice, connect with others to learn, unlearn, evolve, and support one another. And that's why I'm here today. And I am so delighted that you just showed up. Whether you are live or listening to the recording, this is where you are meant to be, right here, right now. So as always, I love to share my message with heart, humor, and humanness. I am flawed, I am imperfect, and I'm also funny. And so I always want to share a fun fact. And it's funny because, it's funny, fun fact. But if we can look for the goodness, if we can look for the fun, if we can look for the things along the way to be grateful for, even while we are grieving. There are many things that I am grieving right now and struggling with. And when the hard feelings hit me, I acknowledge them, I allow them, and we'll talk more about that today. And I also very intentionally create good, seek out the good and the things to be grateful for. And in just sharing this, I could be very sad and crying, and I go out into my backyard, which is just, I've planted so many wonderful perennials, and there's birds and squirrels and nature all around me, which always feeds my heart and soul. And fun fact, today, my very dear friend and neighbors, they are getting chickens. It's just so random because we lived out in the country before, and now we kind of live in a sort of hybrid neighborhood. Town is literally just down the road, and yet we're considered the country, although it's not very far. But we're allowed to have chickens. People are allowed to have chickens here. So they're gone to get 6 chickens. And I can't wait to meet my new neighbors. So I'll have to share more about my friends, my new friends, the chickens, and they're going to be laying eggs. We're going to get fresh eggs. They're going to roam freely, and it'll be very interesting. So I feel like that's a fun fact to share. We're getting chickens as neighbors. So that's my fun fact. And now, as always, I have a ritual of being very present when along the way, I remind myself throughout my day to just stop, take a few deep breaths, and be present, because as they say, life is what happens when we're busy planning other things, and we all have different things calling us away, busyness, etc. We talk about busyness ad nauseum. And I just want to be fully present here. So my ritual for our time is to just make sure my feet are planted on the floor to ground myself. And I take 2 slow, deep breaths. I inhale, and just with a very important intention of sharing a message that you need to hear, sharing what we all need to share today. And when I exhale, I ground myself and I let go of anything That does not serve me or you in this time together. So I invite you to create your own ritual or join me. I'm going to close my eyes and I'm just going to take 2 slow, deep breaths, inhaling through my nose. Set an intention and out through my mouth. Grounding and letting go. And one more time. That moment of quiet just always helps to settle my brain, my mind, and to be fully present with you here today. So let's get started. I have just a wonderful topic today because it's interesting as we continue to learn, unlearn, and evolve. I am in the topics of grief, bereavement, mourning, getting ready for end of life, preparing for end of life, living life to the fullest. I immerse myself in learning. I am continuously learning. And I know that we always learn, and yet every now and again, I'm just, oh my goodness, aha moment, because something hadn't occurred to me in all the years of studying. I had 27 years of nursing, and I've had 29 years of parenting, and I have been, again, immersed in studying from so many incredible teachers, guides, gurus from around the world. And I'm constantly and continually learning something new. And so I want to share, I've spoken about my friend, Maria Kliavkoff, many times because she is this extraordinary, beautiful, wonderful human who created the healthy mourning revolution, mourning with a U. And for many of she gave language to me when we're thinking of what is grief, what is mourning, what is bereavement, etc. And I just attended. We have a weekly conversation, and it is on YouTube. It is on her YouTube channel, my YouTube channel. I have attended many of her events and teachings, and yet once again, there was another aha moment for me. And here's her book that I would love to share, Healthy Mourning, Happy Loving, 52 Ways to Convert Your Grief to Mourning with Ease and Grace. And that was the big, when we talked and she helped me to understand, just give it context, that bereavement is literally torn apart. It's that a time of just being a time of need and grieving, and grief is that internal mental, physical, emotional, spiritual reaction to loss, and it can be to transitions, change, whatever makes your heart ache. And then mourning is that external expression, right, of our grief. And grief is not an emotion. Grief is an array of emotions and reactions, and people get confused with that. They think, you're grieving, you should be sad and crying, and that's all there is to it. And yet it's mental, physical, emotional, spiritual symptoms that we experience. Sometimes we're absolutely shocked by them. It's like, wow, I didn't know I was going to react like that. Sometimes we know, and I feel like it's wonderful to get to know yourself and how grief shows up for you, and also knowing that in different situations, it will also show up in ways you may not expect. I know for me, I mean, crying is one of my go-to. I love I love the fact that I will not apologize for my tears. When someone apologizes for their tears, I say, you're crying because you're sad, no apology needed. You're just, that's your mourning. It's that external expression. And it is actually mourning that we are very uncomfortable with in our society. It's okay to grieve quietly for a certain amount of time, sort of in your own space. And we kind of accept that someone will be sad in tears. However, it's so interesting because mourning is, again, that external expression. It may come out as anger. you're releasing, right? Emotions, energy and motion. It needs to be heard, felt, expressed. Grief needs to be tended to. It is calling you to slow down and hear it. It is calling you to express whatever needs expressing. And so when we convert our grief to mourning, right, then we can, it's like the grief that has its claws in you, the hold, grief doesn't go away, right? It is something that we experience, and we will have, as Maria called it, grief bursts along the way. At times, maybe we expect, at times, maybe we don't expect it. Our anniversaries, birthdays, you hear a song, etc. And sometimes it just may be, and that could be 10 years later, and that's okay. Grief, as Maria explained it, is not something we need to carry forever and be cloaked in, she didn't say this part, I'm adding this, cloaked in darkness. And that shows how much we loved someone. Grief is that journey. And what Maria explained was there is no closure. What grief allows us to journey towards is discovering where our relationship is. So when we're grieving someone who died, a pet, something meaningful, where is that relationship now? How do we define that spiritual relationship now? It is no longer a physical relationship. It is a spiritual relationship connection. And when we do our work, as I would say, it's grief work. There's nothing easy about grieving and feeling all those hard emotions. It is not easy. I understand. And that's why wonderful, well-meaning people tell us to keep busy and keep our chin up and look at the positive. And what we need to do is feel our hard feelings. And when others are telling us that it is from a place of compassion, they care, they don't want to see us suffer, and it can also trigger their own grief. Because another wonderful concept Maria shared with me is buried and carried grief, right? We all have buried and carried grief. We stuffed it down. It's in there, whether it happened in childhood, last week, last year, whatever. We tend to busy it away, drink it away, not think it away. We don't want to think it. And so when I say when someone is grieving or mourning, the greatest gift that we can give them is just show up. Acknowledge and allow their grief, create safe space for them to mourn. And if it is buried and carried grief, we don't need to say, oh, that happened a long time ago, it's time for you to forget it. We can always, as again, Maria studied with Dr. Alan Wolfelt, and he is so extraordinary. He studied with Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. It's just so awesome. And we can, that buried and carried grief that we never quite acknowledged or expressed, we didn't convert it to mourning, we carry it with us. And she said that the symptoms can harden over time, right? So if you say someone died and you were never able to talk about it, every time you talk about it, you start shaking and crying. And you've never allowed those feelings. When that happens, you just bury it and carry it. Get back down there. I don't want to feel this. And so every time their name is mentioned, you're shaking and crying, right? Those symptoms have hardened over time. It's just so interesting and extraordinary to realize that there is actually a process, and the grief journey is to reestablish, reconnect that relationship. And so if we eliminated the word closure, we need closure. There is no closure. Who wants closure? And understood that we can convert our grief to mourning, and mourning presents itself in many different ways. And the huge aha moment actually I had when I attended Maria's last webinar what she was talking about at a funeral, or, when people gather and people are mourning, so they're crying, they're sharing stories of the person, and that is a wonderful way to mourn, to express, right? And to share those memories. You can create an altar of pictures and little trinkets and gadgets that remind you of the person. And also, for the very first time, drum roll, I always talk about heart, humor, and humanness. And she said, in sometimes at a funeral or wherever, and you hear laughter, and people are laughing. Perhaps they're remembering an amazing story or a hysterical, funny story about the person and they're sharing. And that is also mourning. Ah, ta-da. I always thought mourning was more solemn, and maybe you're creating an altar or crying or you're angry, and I get it. Those hard, or like the hard feelings or expressions, and the wonderful things, and also laughing, that laughter. You have those emotions or feelings and grief bubbling inside of you, and when it comes out in this laughter because you're remembering this story, do you remember when this person, I don't know, jumped out of a tree, fell on their face, whatever they did, that made you laugh? That is also a part of it. That can be mourning. And I've never thought of it that way. And so imagine, there's so many times when, people are at a visitation, or they're gathered remembering someone who died, and sometimes people laugh and they're thinking, oh gosh, like this is so appropriate. I'm laughing, remembering this story. I better stifle that. Or others are just like, oh, why are they laughing? What a wonderful way to mourn, to just allow those feelings, allow that expression. So that was my aha moment. I felt, oh, that makes sense. And imagine if we all understood this, right? People aren't laughing to bury their hard feelings, perhaps. Maybe they are. But if we could acknowledge and allow all feelings and allow all experiences, grief, joy, tears, laughter, anger, understanding that people can be kind of foggy when they are mourning or grieving, and just to allow grace and space for ourselves and for others. I know that when I'm grieving internally and struggling, I get antsy, and I need to express it. I need to get it out. And for me, I always turn to nature, and I will garden and think of things, and tears may be a part of it. And if someone died, maybe I will plant a beautiful flower that I knew they loved. I have daisies in my backyard to honor my grandmama, who was just this wonderful being in my life, who died many years ago, and I feel her presence, and I know that we are connected. There is no closure, and I don't wait for signs. I just know that we have a connection. And I know I've shared this before many times. People think, okay, well, I want a sign that we have this spiritual connection. And there are signs. Some, people find dimes, and they see flowers, and they hear something, and enjoy these beautiful signs. And if these physical signs do not appear to know, that does not mean that you are not spiritually connected. I just know I am. I just know that I am. That's what I choose to believe. And so, again, when we're talking about mourning and that external expression, and it's funny because I remember in my book, I shared Deb's story when her 22-year-old son died. And in the first week, she was back at the gym, and everyone thought, oh my goodness, why are you back at the gym? That's, inappropriate or wrong, or you should be home grieving and mourning. And guess what? She needed to release and mourn, and even if she worked out and just she needed to express that, and that was her way. We don't need to judge. We don't need to compare. I would much rather see people out there digging in the garden, planting, working out at the gym, talking about the person, laughing at times, crying at times, allowing it all, knowing that that's what they needed to do in the moment. Because we are a society, our Western culture doesn't understand grief, mourning, any of it. And why should we? Why on earth would we have a clue about any of this? We are just starting to normalize these conversations. And so we also need to give ourselves grace and forgive ourselves for not knowing. You don't know what you don't know. And allowing. And I think of, I've been speaking recently with teachers that are, teachers, my goodness, here they are, they could be going through their own challenges. Of course they are at times, and they have all these grieving students, grieving different things. They didn't get into the class. This person's being bullied. This child has a dying grandparent, their children divorced, their dog's dying. There's just so many. And this wonderful teacher wanted me to come and speak to the class, as I would absolutely love to have a conversation with them. And until everyone gets a little nervous, right? If someone's going to come and talk about these things, it's very uncomfortable. They'd rather not talk about it. And so I said, in the meantime, perhaps you could have a book, something where the children can write down or do a picture, whatever they need to express their grief, and to understand that, sometimes you have those hard feelings, and that's natural, and we just need to get them out. So you can draw a picture, or you could have a jar, and I said you could go outside and gather rocks, and maybe you just write down the person's name or your dog's name or something, the person you're thinking of, and you want everyone to send them love, and you put it in a jar. Or you have a big board at the back where kids can write their feelings today, or whatever they need to write, or even on a piece of paper in a jar that no one will read, or if they want to read. And there's just, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could just, those little simple things that we could do to help convert their grief to mourning, to help us understand that that's, when you're having those hard feelings, they just need to be felt and heard. And I would recommend to anyone to go to Maria's website and order this book, 52 Ways to Convert Your Grief to Mourning. And it's funny because there are 52 weeks in the year, and Maria didn't even realize she wrote 52 and 52. It just happened. I reread this, and I know that when I'm grieving, I understand that it's like my brain shuts off. I don't quite, I don't think, you can think a lot more clear when you're not grieving and emotions are swirling around. So that's why I've created a compassionate community around me where grief, I know who I can call to say, I am struggling right now. I continue to learn, unlearn, and evolve. And I absolutely am teaching by my own example. And that is the greatest thing we can do, because when we're trying to fix other people, and that's where that compassion fatigue and burnout and not being able to just show up occur. When we want to fix it, we don't want them to feel these feelings. And here's the good news. They are their own grief expert. You are not their grief expert. I am not someone else's grief expert. They know what they need more than anyone else, and we can offer support can help them to understand if they want information and these wonderful resources, that you are willing to just show up. They do not have to do it alone. And converting their grief to mourning, sharing stories, and crying or being angry or whatever they need to do, or creating rituals, beautiful rituals every year at to honor someone at their birthday, the anniversary of their death, whatever it may be. You can have a dinner of their favorite foods. You can sing their favorite songs, whatever. You can play their music. There are so many things you can turn to. If they loved animals, you can go to the shelter and go love on animals, be the evidence that someone's life made a difference. I think that's a beautiful way to convert our grief to mourning, right? And continue that relationship and allow all your feelings, and find meaningful ways for you to convert your grief to mourning. And again, the greatest thing that you can do is teach others by example. We do not have to be strong for everyone. We do not have to fix anyone. Their grief journey is their own. You can share what you've learned. You can teach by example, and you can just show up for yourself first and just show up for others. And so as we reframe and redefine and understand grief, mourning, bereavement, all of these natural parts of this journey, just know that we can do it differently. Isn't that such good news? We can do this differently. We can learn how to just show up for ourselves and each other. We can learn how to convert our grief to mourning, and just know that it's a part of this journey we call life. And if you have gratitude and love, if you just show up with heart, humor, and humanness, you can make the difference for yourself and for others. That is the very best thing that we can do. So I would absolutely love to hear how you convert your grief to mourning. What helps you to express? Is it art, music? Is it crying? Is it angry? You go break things? Whatever it may be, the more we share ideas with one another, the more we will be able to navigate this with ease and grace. And go to healthymourning.com. Maria, her teaching is just so valuable and has made such a difference in my life. So my friends, thank you again for just showing up, for being willing to be the change in your life so that you can show others, so that you can be the very best version of you. That is the greatest gift. That is the greatest gift you can give the world. And my call to action, as you know, as always, go to my website, of course. All my beautiful resources are there. Watch my TEDx talk, which will help you, just remind you how to just show up. And in the meantime, the very, very first thing that we must lean into if we want to be able to change, just take that first step. Want to change. And how do you start? Plan your life, plan your death, and then just love your life to death. And always bring your own tambourine to the party. Thanks so much. Someday I'm going to figure out a way that I can shake that and you can hear it because my speaker takes out that noise. I don't know. If you know, let me know. In the meantime, have a beautiful day. Learn more about converting your grief to mourning, and know that I am always here to love and support you along the way. Bye for now.